My sister didn't forget to introduce me at her company's anniversary gala. She introduced me on purpose, the way you place something ugly in the corner of a room, so guests know where not to look. She found me near the coat check, smiled like we were close, and steered me by the elbow through a crowd of blazers and champagne flutes. Her grip was light but directional, the kind that says move without ever saying please. The Whitmore Group's 25th anniversary. Black tie, rooftop venue, downtown Chicago. The kind of event where the ice sculptures have sponsors. My name is Nora. I'm 32. I write code that finds things people hide. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a spy thriller way. I'm a digital forensics analyst. When a company suspects internal fraud, data theft, or a breach they can't explain, they call someone like me. I get into systems. I map what moved, when it moved, where it went, and who touched it. I work alone, mostly at night, in a home office that smells like cold coffee and dry erase markers. I don't have a title that sounds impressive at dinner parties. I don't have a title that sounds like anything, actually. People hear digital forensics and nod the way they do when they've stopped listening. My sister Diana is 38. She's a senior vice president at a mid-sized financial consulting firm. She has the kind of career that photographs well-award plaques, conference panels, LinkedIn posts with 1,000 likes. My parents treat her name like a verb. Be more like Diana. Diana handled that so well. Diana never would have. I was invited to the gala the way you're invited to fill a seat. Diana had mentioned it twice, both times in the same sentence as just show up, nothing fancy. It's not a big deal. Which meant it was a very big deal, and she needed a body count for the plus ones. I found my name card at a table near the service entrance. Not the back, technically, near the service entrance. I could hear the kitchen. My mother appeared before I'd even sat down. She was in the navy dress she saves for events where she wants to look like she belongs. She looked at my outfit, a dark blazer, clean lines, nothing wrong with it, and said, "You look tired," which is her way of saying she wished I'd tried harder. My father kissed my cheek. "Don't hover around Diana tonight," he said quietly. "She's networking. This is important for her." I stared at him. I'd been in the room for 4 minutes. When have I ever hovered? He looked at his watch. Diana found me 20 minutes later. She was glowing in the way people glow when a room is theirs. She had a man beside her, tall, silver-haired, the kind of composed that comes from decades of not needing to explain yourself. She was already steering toward me before I could process the direction. "There she is," Diana said brightly, to the man. "I want you to meet someone." I stood. "This is my younger sister, Nora," she said. And then she smiled, wide and warm and sharp at the edges, and added, "She does computer stuff. She's never really found her lane." The man looked at me. Not the quick social skim, the kind people do at events like this to sort you into useful or not. He actually looked. Something flickered at the back of his eyes. Fast, like a match lighting in wind. My mother appeared at Diana's shoulder on cue. "Nora's always been more of a behind-the-scenes type," she offered, with a small, apologetic laugh. "We don't really understand what she does, honestly." My father materialized too, chuckling. "She's better with machines than people." The man didn't laugh. His head tilted. Barely a degree. His eyes hadn't left my face. Diana pressed on, still smiling. "Anyway, this is Richard Hale. He's the keynote tonight." "Richard, this is Nora Calloway," the man said. "Not a question." Diana's smile froze at the corners. My mother's laugh died mid-breath. My father went very still. Richard Hale looked at me the way you look at something you've been searching for and finally found in an obvious place. "I've been trying to find you for 2 years," he said quietly. "I didn't know your first name." The table nearest to us went silent. The champagne glasses held still. Diana blinked. "Sorry, what?" Richard didn't look at her. 8 years ago, I was 24, and broke in the way that feels permanent. Student loans, a studio apartment in a building where the heat worked seasonally, and a contract job doing IT triage for a regional insurance company. Not forensics, not analysis. Resetting passwords and walking office managers through software updates over the phone. The work paid enough to keep the apartment and not enough to forget I had it. In the evenings, I worked on my own. Not because I had a plan, because I had a problem I couldn't stop thinking about. A family friend, a woman who ran a small dental practice, had mentioned offhand that her billing software kept showing odd reimbursements, amounts she didn't recognize tied to procedure codes she hadn't submitted. Her accountant had looked at it, shrugged, blamed a software glitch. She'd let it go, but she mentioned it to my mother at a church lunch, and my mother mentioned it to me the way she mentions anything she considers beneath serious attention. I asked to look at the system. Just curious. The way some people do puzzles. What I found wasn't a glitch. Someone had embedded a looping reimbursement script inside a routine software update. A script that skimmed small amounts from insurance paybacks into a third-party account, repeatedly, at intervals timed to avoid audit flags. It wasn't large money per cycle. Over 18 months across 47 dental practices using the same billing platform, it had taken nearly $300,000. I documented everything. Network logs, script code, account trails, timestamps. I wrote a 60-page report because I didn't know what else to do with it. Then I sent it to the billing software company's general contact address because I didn't know who else to send it to. I got an auto reply. I assumed it disappeared. The dental practice stopped seeing the anomalies. I assumed the company had quietly patched it and moved on. I told myself it was a coincidence. I went back to resetting passwords. A year later, I found a different kind of work. A friend of a friend needed help tracing where a shared business account had been accessed from. That led to another job, then another. Slowly, quietly, I built something from the ground up. No firm, no team, just a reputation that traveled through referrals in industries where people don't talk loudly about being defrauded. I never thought about the dental billing report again. Apparently, Richard Hale did. His assistant guided me away from the gala floor 20 minutes after the introduction, a side room off the main hall, the kind of space event venues keep for exactly this conversations that need a door between them and the party. Richard sat across from me. No drink, no phone on the table, just attention, direct and uncluttered. The billing platform you reported the vulnerability on 8 years ago, he said. That was Meridian Billing Systems. My company. I went still. The report you sent came through the general inbox, he said. My head of security flagged it and brought it to me personally. It was the most thorough, unsolicited vulnerability disclosure we had ever received. I assumed it came from a security consultancy. We couldn't find a firm name. The sender email was a personal address. No signature, no credentials. I was 24, I said. I didn't have credentials. He nodded, unhurried. We used your documentation to identify and shut down the exploit across our entire client network. We filed with federal authorities. 3 people were charged. He paused. We also overhauled our audit protocols entirely based on your report structure. That framework is still in use today. Something in my chest moved in a direction I wasn't expecting. Not pride. More like vertigo, the feeling of discovering a room existed in a house you thought you'd mapped completely. Why were you looking for me? I asked. He slid a thin folder across the table. Meridian was acquired 18 months ago by a larger platform group. Since the acquisition, we've been seeing anomalies again. Different in structure, harder to locate, but the signature has a shape I've seen before. He looked at me steadily. Someone inside knows our audit protocols. They know exactly where the edges of our detection system are, which means they either helped build it or they've studied it very carefully. I touched the folder. We have a forensics team, he said. They've been on it for 6 months. They haven't found the entry point. He let that land. I want an outside perspective. Someone who's seen this specific kind of architecture before. I looked at the folder. Even through the cover, I could feel the weight of a problem with structure, with pattern, with the particular shape of intentional concealment. My brain does a thing when it sees that weight. It leans forward before the rest of me decides to. That's a significant scope, I said. It's a significant contract, he said. But I don't think that's why you'd say yes. I thought about my studio apartment 8 years ago. The family friend's dental practice. The 60-page report sent into silence. When would you need me to start? I didn't tell Diana that night. I went back to the gala, found my table by the kitchen, and ate the salmon in the particular piece of a person who has just been handed something real. She found me as the event wound down. Her composure was intact, but her eyes were doing calculations. What did Richard want? She asked. To catch up, I said. Her jaw tightened, just slightly. He's been in conversations with our firm about a potential partnership. He's very selective about who he works with. A pause, thin as a blade. I didn't know you two had met before. We hadn't, I said. She looked at me for a long moment. The look of someone rearranging furniture in their head to see if the room still makes sense. Nora, she said slowly. Whatever he's suggesting, just be careful. You don't really operate at that level. I smiled. I'll keep that in mind. The work took 11 weeks. I was given red access to Meridian's system architecture and 14 months of transaction logs. I built a local environment, mirrored the network topology, and started where I always start. Not where the money moved, but where it almost moved. The near misses, the aborted transactions, the requests that initiated and then reversed. That's where behavior lives. That's where you see the person behind the machine. By week 2, I had a shape. Not a name, not a method, a shape. The anomalies clustered around a single onboarding pipeline, new accounts processed during a specific 3-hour window that recurred every 11 days. Not daily, not weekly. 11 days, which is irregular enough to avoid rhythm-based detection, but consistent enough to be deliberate. Within that window, small data packets were leaving the network through what looked like routine diagnostic pings. They weren't. They were encoded, lightweight, and addressed to a relay server that had been registered under a subsidiary company name 6 weeks after the acquisition closed. By week 6, I could trace the relay to a domestic IP cluster. By week 8, I had the full routing path. By week 10, I had the account structure that was receiving the extracted data client information, proprietary audit logic, platform architecture maps. Not money. Information. The kind that could be sold to a competitor, or used to build a competing product, or leveraged in a negotiation no one was supposed to know was happening. Vake Alaven. I had a name. I had 2 names, actually. The person who built the extraction tool, and the person inside Meridian who had given them the access credentials to do it. The inside person was a senior systems manager who had joined the company 4 months post-acquisition. His name was Garrett Calloway, my cousin. I sat with that for a long time, long enough for the coffee to go cold twice. Garrett and I had grown up at the same holiday tables. He was 3 years older, always the one who understood tech before the rest of the family did, who'd gone into corporate IT and climbed steadily. He'd been laid off when his previous company restructured. He'd needed the job at Meridian. He'd gotten it, apparently, through a reference. Through Diana. I pulled every associated record. Garrett's access logs, his communications with the external relay account, the timestamps of the 11-day windows, they lined up exactly with his shift rotations. He'd been careful. He hadn't been careful enough. I stared at the network map on my screen. Every node connected, every path documented. Truth drawn in lines and timestamps. I thought about what Diana had said at the gala. You don't really operate at that level. I thought about the kitchen sounds from my assigned table. I thought about my mother's apologetic laugh. We don't really understand what she does. I wrote the report. The presentation was in a glass-walled conference room on the 14th floor of Meridian's downtown office. Richard sat at the head of the table, his legal team on one side, his executive leadership on the other. A federal cybercrime liaison attended by phone. I connected my laptop and pulled up the network map. I walked them through it in the order that made the most sense. Architecture first, then the anomaly pattern, then the extraction method, then the routing, then the destination. Faces shifted as the picture assembled. The way faces do when a thing they half suspected becomes a thing they can no longer look away from. Then I put up the access logs with the associated credentials. Then the name. Richard's legal counsel asked 3 clarifying questions. I answered them. The cybercrime liaison asked 2 more. I answered those too. Then the room was quiet in the way rooms get quiet when the information has settled into the floor and no one wants to be the first to stand on it. Richard looked at me across the table. You're certain? The documentation is complete, I said. Yes. He nodded once, the way he'd nodded at the gala, like respect given without ceremony. His head of security asked, The inside contact, how did they get their credentials past the acquisition security review? I pulled up the final slide. The reference letter that had accompanied Garrett's original application. The signatory. Diana Calloway, Senior Vice President. I want to be precise here about what Diana did and didn't do. She didn't know. I'm confident of that. The communication records showed Garrett had told her he needed a character reference for a standard IT role, and she'd provided one without asking questions, the way people with social capital spend it, without checking the balance. But she had opened the door. And she had never told anyone she knew him. Not when Meridian came into her firm's orbit as a potential partner. Not when Garrett's name circulated internally. Whether that was carelessness or convenience, I couldn't say. I documented what I could document. Diana called me that evening. I let it ring twice. Then I answered, because I'm not interested in theatrics. I just got off the phone with our managing director, she said. Her voice was controlled in the way that takes effort. He told me your report named me in connection with the Meridian situation. Your name appears in the documentation, I said, as the reference contact. That's factual. Nora. A breath. You could have called me first. That's not how forensic reporting works. We're family. There it was. The same two words, spoken in the same tone, as if the word family were a currency that canceled debt. You introduced me to a room full of people as someone who never found her lane, I said, in front of Richard Hale, specifically. Did you know who he was when you said that? Silence. Diana. I didn't know he knew you, she said finally. I didn't know any of that. I know, I said. That's almost worse. She was quiet for a moment. So what happens now? Garrett's situation is with federal investigators, I said. Your situation is with your firm's compliance team. I didn't editorialize in the report. The facts are the facts. And us? She asked. I looked at my screen. The network map still open. Nodes connected. Paths clear. I don't know yet, I said. That was honest. I didn't know. The work was clean. The work was done. The rest of it, the kitchen table seat, the she never found her lane, the decades of being the one my parents summarized in an apology that was a longer project with less certain methodology. My parents called together, on speaker, which they only do when they've agreed on a position in advance. My mother started. We heard what happened with Garrett. This is devastating for Aunt Carol. I know, I said. You could have handled this differently, my father said. There were options that didn't involve federal investigators. No, I said. There weren't. That's not how this works. He's family. He was committing federal crimes inside a client's infrastructure. My mother's voice shifted into a register I recognized from childhood, the soft, slightly wounded tone that was somehow always my fault. Nora, you've always had a way of making things harder than they need to be. I sat with that for a moment. I used to believe that, I said. I don't anymore. My father. What does that mean? It means I spent a long time thinking my way of seeing things was the problem. It wasn't. It's the reason 3 dental practices got their money back 8 years ago, and nobody knew my name. It's the reason Richard Hale's company still has proprietary infrastructure that belongs to them. The way I see things is the only thing I've ever been good at, and I'm done apologizing for it. No one spoke. I'm not angry, I said, which was mostly true. I'm just finished shrinking. 3 weeks after the report was filed, Richard called me directly. He didn't lead with the contract. He asked if I was all right. I appreciated that. Then he told me that Meridian's board had approved a budget for an independent security advisory role ongoing, quarterly audits, system architecture review, incident response consultation. He wanted to know if I was interested. I said yes. Then he said something else. For what it's worth, I've worked with a lot of forensics firms. I've never seen someone reconstruct an 11-day irregular cycle from diagnostic ping patterns alone. That's not training. That's instinct. It's pattern recognition, I said. Same thing, he said. I drove past the Whitmore rooftop venue 3 months later. Not deliberately. Chicago downtown. Regular traffic. The building just appeared the way buildings do when a city is small enough to be circular. I thought about Diana's hand on my elbow, steering me across that room. I thought about she never found her lane delivered with such easy confidence, such absolute certainty about where I ranked. The thing about lanes is that they're drawn by people who want traffic to be predictable. I've never been interested in being predictable. I'm interested in being accurate. Those are different roads entirely. My family still doesn't fully understand what I do. My mother still occasionally introduces me with a pause before the explanation. My father still looks at my work like it's a language he chose not to learn, but I stopped waiting for the translation. Diana and I don't talk much. We're not estranged exactly. We're honest, which in some families amounts to the same thing. She faced a compliance review at her firm. It wasn't pleasant. Her reference for Garrett was categorized as an undisclosed conflict of interest. She kept her job. She lost something harder to name. Garrett's case is still moving through federal channels. I don't track it closely. I documented what was there. What happens next isn't my architecture to design. What I have now, clients who found me through referral, work that fits the shape of my brain, a home office that smells like cold coffee, and, occasionally, something that cost me years to recognize as confidence. And if there's something useful in any of this, it's not about revenge. Revenge is loud and imprecise. It's about the difference between a label and a measurement. People will call you what is convenient for them. They'll assign you a lane, a table, a category, an apology. That's their system. It doesn't have to be yours. Find the pattern, document it, show your work. The rest tends to correct itself.